pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Commissioner Harper Pedersen,
Present.
Commissioner Silberman,
Present.
Commissioner Corral,
Present.
and Chair Marsters.
Present.
Missed me, but
Jesse's here too.
yeah, Jesse's here. I'm right here.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Gutierrez, I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Still present.
The next item on the agenda is public comment, and public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on a future Commission agenda for more comprehensive action or report. Is there anybody here who would like to speak under public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes. Does anyone,
Approval. Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, well, now we'll move on to the public hearing. The procedure for a public hearing. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, etc. on the application, followed with the staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation. In this case, there's no applicant. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The Commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers should fill out a speaker's form found by the door and hand it to the recording secretary prior to addressing the Commission. The speaker should come up to the microphone to speak since the meeting is being recorded. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. Lisa?
Is this on? Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Marsters and Commissioners. My name is Lisa Porras, and I work with Al Savain, the Community Development Department in the Planning Division. The item before you tonight consists of several amendments to the city zoning ordinance, and the purpose of these amendments is to address 3 geographic areas of the city that have been identified for more than 20 years as key strategic economic development sites. And these areas have been called out as landmark sites in both past and current policy documents. This evening, I will provide the Commission with some background about the landmark sites, including where they're located, the related policies, information about staff's outreach with property owners, describe the proposed amendments to the Commission, and finally provide staff's recommendation. But before I move further into the presentation, I'd like to point out several corrections to the materials in the attachments to the staff report. The first correction is with respect to landmark site A. There was a question on whether 2 parcels identified as 835 and 883 East San Carlos Avenue were included in landmark site A. And there was an error, a mapping error in Exhibit E to the first attachment, and we have since corrected that, and that should be available for you on the dais. So again, those 2 sites, 835 and 883 San Carlos Avenue, are not part of landmark site A. The second correction had to do with the typo carryover, and this is with respect to a development standard for the proposed new zoning district, landmark commercial. The FAR should be 2.0. And the third correction has to do with something that actually a property owner brought up to us, and it had to do with cleanup to the general commercial industrial use classification for indoor warehousing. And currently in the zoning ordinance, it doesn't discuss allowing small individual storage spaces inside some of the industrial indoor warehousing use classification. So as part of this effort, we're just adding that. So those are just make up some of the corrections that you have. So landmark sites. Landmark sites first surfaced in the East San Carlos Specific Plan, which was adopted in 1991, amended in 2000, and still in place actually up until 2009 when the new general plan was adopted. And landmark sites in concept and as areas subject to unique regulations were carried forward into both the general plan and economic development plan. This slide here shows the land use map that's contained in the East San Carlos Specific Plan, and although it's difficult to read, the three highlighted areas depict the location of the three landmark sites. And like I said, they're I highlighted them, but they didn't come out so good in the PowerPoint. So one of the sites is located here at Holly and Industrial. Another landmark site was denoted here. And the third over on the south end of the city where Circle Star Hotel presently is. The staff report identifies these as landmark sites A, B, and C. And as you can see, they all have common geographies. They are all located between Industrial Road and Highway 101. They have immediate freeway access and good highway visibility. So the next several slides are aerial photographs of all the landmark sites, and we can go through these quickly and then we can refer back to them as we need it, but it's always good to have some good visuals so we can all understand the areas that we're referring to. So this area is denoted as landmark site A in the staff report, and it pretty much runs, the boundary would run from here and include all the properties around here. And this next site shows the same area but with parcel boundaries. So as you can see, there's 5 parcels that make up landmark site A. This is denoted as landmark site B in the staff report. And here is another image of it. This one consists of 2 parcels. This is where In-N-Out currently is. Unfortunately, Google didn't have a more current air photo of that. And here is the other parcel. Landmark site C consists of what was former, well, landmark C, it's an interesting part. Landmark C, the vision for it was partially fulfilled. The area of landmark C includes these properties here to the south and then all the way down, including the Circle Star Hotel. So this site here, as we can all see, has already been developed with that large-scale, regional, destination-oriented type of use. There are 5 remaining parcels that staff is recommending remain their status as landmark sites. So for landmark site C, we're not including the area here because, again, it was already developed. It was developed under a PD, and it has its own development regulations, so there's no need to include it. So landmark site C, again, here, you can see the parcel boundaries located here. So the next several slides provide a historic account of past policies, and these policies is what staff actually used to help frame the outline of the amendments and help frame the purpose for why staff is proposing such amendments to the zoning ordinance. So we'll start with the most historic document where landmark sites were first identified, and that is the East San Carlos Specific Plan. And the purpose of the plan, at the beginning when you open up the plan, it says the purpose is to provide a mix of uses that monitor and guide redevelopment in the East San Carlos area, that they would facilitate optimal land use in this area, maintain and grow the economy, tax revenues and employment, and increase sales and property tax revenues. The land use goals and policies for the East San Carlos Specific Plan Again, some of these, the language in here repeats itself, but it is to encourage a mix of uses that increase the net fiscal benefit to the city. The goals also looked at garnering attention to regional retail uses consisting of destination-type facilities containing a minimum of 25,000 square feet per individual use, and these were to be encouraged at landmark sites. The city should also encourage the development of locations designated as landmark sites with high visibility uses drawing from a regional market base. So the terms regional, high visibility, minimum of 25,000 square feet per use, and uses that increase the net fiscal benefits to the city, you'll see some of these concepts carried over into the amendments. Landmark sites even had their own unique land use category in the East San Carlos specific plan. The land use category defined landmark as uses that have higher quality, with really good site design and maximum landscaping, building heights greater than 50 feet, high quality architectural design, enhanced circulation networks throughout, and it also required that traffic analyses be done with proposed development. Sites targeted for redevelopment were to have been developed with preferred uses, and the implementation section of the East San Carlos specific plan stated that other uses proposed for these sites would be considered on an interim basis. Interim uses shall entail use of existing buildings, and the erection of permanent buildings that are not consistent with the land use vision would not be permitted. Again, this is all in the 1991 East San Carlos specific plan. The city's economic development plan
Lisa,
also...
can I ask you,
Sure.
go back? Is a lot of this based on the formation of the redevelopment agency?
A lot of the
A lot of
East San
the-
Carlos
the-
specific
the
plan.
East San Carlos specific plan?
I'm going to have Al
Not
address that.
necessarily, no. I mean, the boundaries were within the redevelopment agency area, but that wasn't it lined up, but no, the redevelopment plan didn't necessarily put forward a landmark development site.
But were these sort of put together in order to sort of appease the redevelopment plan at the time?
Not necessarily. It was simply an economic development tool and a land use vision for the city. The redevelopment plan really had the tools to implement this, and gave us more tools as a city to implement this. But that's really what it was, is an implementation tool as opposed to an economic development, land use strategy.
Okay, thank you.
The city's economic development plan also includes language with respect to landmark sites, in particular a landmark hotel. There were past efforts to assemble some parcels and attract a high-quality hotel, and the economic development plan of 2010 talks about widening that effort, that staff should work to gather more data, and all of this would be used to support and attract a hotel to the landmark site, specifically the landmark site at Holly and Industrial. The general plan, the new general plan that was adopted in 2009, also has a page on page 23 that talks about the San Carlos East Side area, and in particular calls out 3 landmark sites as major entries to the city that are designated for redevelopment. And it states that one of the key issues for the general plan is to redevelop the remaining landmark sites, although it doesn't denote in the general plan where the landmark sites are, actually, but it does refer to landmark sites. So some of that, the concept that was in the 1991 plan, was carried over into the general plan. There are additional general plan goals and policies that support the idea of looking at uses that would contribute to the local economy and support the fiscal well-being of the city. That's land use goal number 5 that's in the general plan. And the general plan also refers back to the economic development plan with a policy that calls for implementing the economic development plan and to promote economic revitalization on parcels that are underutilized but designated for high-intensity land uses. The general plan also talks about strengthening the economic vitality of the East Side, encouraging a mix of diverse commercial uses, and also has a policy that calls out encourage development of landmark sites at Industrial Road and Holly Street. So here again we see landmark sites in the general plan. The general plan also has a goal that talks about providing for attractive and functional gateways. Policies to implement that would require high-quality design at visually significant locations in the gateway areas. Policy Land Use 11.9 specifically calls out landmark sites again, and it says that ensure new development on these sites be done in a way that enhance them as primary gateway features for the Holly Street gateway area. Attention to site planning, building treatment, pedestrian improvements, and landscape features shall exhibit exceptional design. So as both past and current policy documents show, landmark sites are strategic locations that have had land use and development regulations in place for quite some time. And as we saw, some regulations for landmark sites did in fact repeat themselves in the general plan. However, regulations that safeguard the long-standing vision of these sites have not been included in the new zoning ordinance. And so the very purpose of these amendments being presented tonight is to recapture previous requirements to ensure that the policies can be implemented and the vision can be fulfilled. Staff met with the Economic Development Advisory Commission recently on April 23rd and presented some options that would amend the zoning ordinance to address landmark sites. And as indicated in the staff report, the commission voted to rezone the landmark sites as landmark commercial with their own unique zoning designation to make it clear that specific regulations would apply to these key sites. And since staff met with the Economic Development Advisory Commission, we've also had conversations by telephone with property owners who've called in and asked us about what the amendments are addressing. And even up until 3:30 this afternoon and all day, we've met with many property owners to hear their thoughts and their concerns regarding the proposed amendments. And it became quite clear that the property owners are not in favor of these proposed amendments. They don't want an additional use permit process imposed upon prospective tenants, and they don't want time limitations imposed upon prospective tenants. And they strongly believe that requiring a use permit and imposing time limits will lock up their properties and could possibly devalue them. Concerns were also raised from the property owners about graffiti and squatters, which could be potentially occur, they state, if properties are unable to secure a tenant. But most of all, what we heard is that they don't seem to be convinced that these properties will ever become developed with a large-scale regional hotel because it hasn't happened yet. And they've suggested that maybe the city should, maybe let go of the idea for the landmark sites, specifically as an example with the large-scale hotel effort. Yet, it must be noted that landmark sites are not only the last places, but also the best places to do quality landmark development. They represent the primary and most major gateways into the city of San Carlos and have been given a high level of importance for a very long period of time. It's true that the proposed amendments will require a use permit and will set time limitations on uses, but it does that in order to ensure that future development consistent with the long-standing vision will develop into something exceptional, with uses that are regional, large-scale, and destination-oriented. If this vision is no longer supported, then this is the time to have that conversation, and staff will forward any and all recommendations from the Planning Commission to the City Council. As the city's planning staff, our work also involves looking ahead and planning for the future in best interest of the city. We found a gap in the zoning ordinance that leaves landmark sites open to development without any discretionary oversight by the city. And so we're bringing this forward to really ensure that there's some consistency with the general plan and that the general plan policies can be implemented. So the next several slides, we're just going to pretty much dive into what is being proposed.
How long has the gap existed?
The gap has existed since, well, what I can say for sure is the East Side specific plan was intended to be incorporated into the general plan. Some of that happened, not all of it, but some of it happened, and that was in place in 2009. And when the general plan was adopted, the specific plan was officially retired. The language that they use is that it was retired. Were there regulations in the zoning ordinance prior to the one that we have now? I can't say for sure. But if there weren't, and there might not have been, because the specific plan is intended to both be a policy document and an implementation document. So it had very specific language on how development would occur, what conditions would be placed on it, and so forth. So from a conservative perspective, I would say that it hasn't been in place since 2009, and then quite possibly for just a year. The new zoning ordinance was updated in 2011. Al, I don't know if you agree with that or if that's fine.
So 1 to 3 years, is that basically?
About that, right. The amendments being proposed tonight would occur in 5 different areas. The first one is Article 1, which basically is very straightforward. It lists all the zoning districts for the city of San Carlos. So this is just a line item denoting that Landmark Commercial would be a new zoning district. Article 2 is where we begin to see more of the language recaptured from the East San Carlos specific plan into the purpose of the commercial district. We've added a section that talks about, well, what is the purpose of the commercial district in the city of San Carlos, and more specifically, what is the purpose of the landmark commercial zoning designation. The section, Article 2, also contains the land use regulations, which is essentially a large table indicating row by row all the uses that are permitted or conditionally permitted in each one of the commercial districts. This section also sets forward the development standards, how development should occur, what are the rules for building placement, height, etc. Article 4 is an amendment to the use permit required findings. Anything that goes forward under a use permit currently is required to meet a number of different findings. What we've added are 2 additional findings that support the idea of a landmark commercial zoning designation. So we've added 2 in the findings, and again, these 2 would only apply to landmark commercial sites. Article 5 has to do or includes general terms and use classifications. We wanted to add a definition for what do we mean by landmark sites and what do we mean by regional, retail, and destination-oriented uses. So we added those definitions in Article 5 for clarity. And then the last component of an amendment is, of course, to the zoning map itself, where the color on the map would be changed, from what it is now, GCI, to another color indicating landmark commercial. So that's just a visual depiction of the change that would be made. So this is a summary. So as we get into it, there are quite a few of these, and these are all in your staff report, but I felt it important to kind of put them up on the screen so we can kind of take a look at them. So I'll try to go through these quickly so I don't bore anyone, because again, they're all in the staff report. But this is with respect to Article 2, amendments to the commercial district. So one of the purposes, there's 2 purposes for commercial district, and we've simply added a third. And that starts with here, which is to protect the city's interest in orderly, economically sustainable development, traffic circulation, public safety, and to ensure attractive and functional gateways and exceptional architectural design at landmark sites. So we put in some more information about landmark sites. And then about the landmark commercial zoning district in particular, it's proposed to be described as a district intended to accommodate 3 specific areas known collectively as the landmark sites, which are targeted for economic development of regional retail and destination-oriented uses, including large-scale office complexes and hotels as individual or combined uses intended to serve regional users and have significant beneficial results in employment growth and contribute to the economic sustainability of the city and implement the economic development plan. The next section of amendments in the same article, Article 2, commercial districts, has to do with use regulations. So for landmark commercial, as its own new zoning designation, use permits would be required throughout. So for every use, there is a requirement that that a proposed project go through an additional step by obtaining a use permit. Even for the desired uses, that would be required. But for uses other than the regional retail and destination-oriented uses, those would be considered on an interim basis and subject to a use permit from the Planning Commission. And as you can see, the term interim basis is really a carryover from the 1991 East San Carlos Specific Plan. For the development regulations for this new zoning district, those would essentially be the same as they are currently listed under the general commercial industrial zoning designation, with the exception of requiring a minimum of a 25,000 square foot lot size and a minimum lot width of 75 feet. Article 4 amendments have to do with those required findings for use permits. So the language essentially reads, proposed projects located within the landmark commercial zoning district are subject to one of the following additional findings as applicable. So you would only need one. First is regional retail, the other one is interim uses. So for regional retail, you would have to make a finding that the development has significant beneficial results in employment growth and contributes to the economic sustainability of the city and implements the economic development plan and meets the economic objectives for landmark sites. So it's pretty wide-ranging. Although there's been a lot of discussion about a hotel, certainly this captures the idea that there could possibly be something more, something else, something the city hasn't thought of. And then for interim uses, the finding, again, interim uses being uses other than regional retail and destination-oriented, would be considered on an interim basis and shall entail use of existing buildings, which means that anything that's currently existing now, the use can go in. We want the use to use the existing buildings that are currently in place. Erection of permanent buildings that are not consistent with regional retail and destination should not be permitted. And alterations to a building or site would be considered to bring a structure into conformance with building code requirements. So we're not saying that nothing can be done. Certainly if a property owner wants to do a tenant improvement, or there may be some like alterations they need to do to the building or to the site, they could do that. And then finally it says that interim uses shall be conditioned with time limitations, which could be renewed on a periodic basis subject to Planning Commission use permit review and approval. Article 5 amendments, again, here we're talking about the definition for what is a landmark site and what are regional retail and destination-oriented uses. So a lot of this language is similar to what we've stated before. It does talk a little bit about the history of landmark sites, that they were originally included in the East San Carlos Pacific Plan, but that's been retired. They are included in the Economic Development Plan and General Plan. So this would inform a reader that there's some history to the sites, and you can look to the General Plan for some policy guidance as well as the Economic Development Plan as well. And it talks a little bit about preferred uses, large-scale office complexes and hotels, including compatible ancillary uses. The regional retail and destination-oriented uses, we're talking about uses that have a quality that draw from a regional base, a quality that's large in scale, that including uses such as offices or hotels as individual or combined uses. And we also state here that commercial entertainment and recreation, as well as eating and drinking establishments, could be considered as ancillary uses. So we're pretty much to the conclusion of the presentation. Having said all that, staff's recommendation is for the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance to amend the San Carlos zoning map and San Carlos zoning ordinance, which is Title 18 of the Municipal Code, which would establish a new zoning district, landmark commercial, and to amend use regulations pertaining to general commercial industrial zoning district. Those are some cleanups. And if you have any questions about that, I didn't discuss them specifically, but we're certainly available to answer that. So that concludes staff's presentation. Tonight, Al Savay, Mark Sawicki, and I are all available to answer questions. But before I turn it back over to the chair, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Al Savay and Kamas Steinmetz, who have some additional items to cover. Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to briefly address, in one of the letters that we received this afternoon, they questioned the CEQA clearance for the project that was cited in the staff report, section 15061B3. And after taking a look at this, I think this section does apply, though we could also rely on another section that is perhaps a better fit for the project, which is CEQA guidelines section 15168, subsection C2, which states that if the agency finds no new effects could occur or no new mitigation measures would be required, the agency can approve the activity as being within the scope of the project covered by the program EIR, and no new environmental document would be required. So we can consider this zoning action within the scope of the general plan update EIR that was recently certified. And so this is the, we would add this section as CEQA clearance for the project.
I don't have anything else to add, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Not at this time.
Not at this time.
Just Ms. Steinmetz, I know there were a number of legal issues that were raised in various locations, spot zoning, regulatory taking. There was at least one other. Have you looked at all of those in your legal opinion? Is there any legal reason why we couldn't adopt this ordinance today?
I have looked at them. Spot zoning, I think it's a very high threshold to meet. And even when there is spot zoning, it's only discriminatory spot zoning that is unconstitutional. And zoning may be upheld if there's a rational basis or a public benefit that exists for the classification. And I think that Lisa outlined the public benefit for this zoning. As far as inverse condemnation regulatory taking, the law has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. And it's really a factual determination by the court, but there's three primary factors that are considered in determining whether there's been a regulatory taking, meaning that the regulation has gone too far in regulating a property owner's property. And those factors are the economic impact of the regulation on the property owner, the extent to which the regulation has interfered with distinct what's called investment-backed regulations.
Expectations?
Yes, investment-backed expectations, and the nature of the governmental action. So there's been recent case law that's added 10 additional factors, which would take a while to go through, but it's really a factual determination. And from my quick review of case law, typically downzoning has consistently been upheld, even when there's been a significant reduction in property values. For example, at Agins versus City of Tiburon, downzoning from commercial to residential with reduction in value from $400,000 to $75,000 was upheld. Downzoning to open space designation was upheld in a County of Marin case. Downzoning causing reduction in value from $3,500,000 to $675,000 was upheld in a City of Fremont case. And then in a Tahoe Regional Planning Agency case, downzoning from industrial to general forest, leaving only less than 25% of the former value remaining, was upheld. So it's clear that solely a reduction in economic value is not enough to trigger a regulatory taking. So those are two of the issues that were raised.
So, is there, I think someone alludes to the possibility that this zoning regulation would remove all economic value to this property. I mean, do we believe that to be the case?
No, though that's, there's really four types of takings. There's, first is permanent physical invasions, which this is not applicable. Denial of all economically beneficial use, which is very rare and would not also be the case here. And then there's the partial regulatory takings, which I walked you through the three factors. And then land use exactions, which are conditions on a project approval. So this would fall into the partial regulatory taking category.
And is only one...
Which is really reviewed now. It used to be reviewed under a case where you're looking at the governmental purpose and economic viable use of the land. Now we're back to, if you're familiar with Penn Central, we're back to that case and those three factors that I just recited, along with a recent Ninth Circuit case that adds 10 additional factors that a court will look at in balancing whether the interest of the municipality outweighs the interest of the property owner.
And only one of these parcels has been sold during the last 3 years, is that right? Or is it more than one? Just one?
Yes.
And there's currently one in escrow?
Is it the same one?
Not that we're aware of.
Maybe I misunderstood
Yeah, there was a
that.
letter from,
It was in the letter.
yeah.
In escrow, you'd have to ask the broker or the property owner, but that's,
I'm sure we'll get to that.
yeah.
I have one question for staff at the moment, and that is, what uses are actually permitted under the landmark, the LC designation?
You mean temporary or permanent?
I mean, when you look at the zoning ordinance, under every single designation, there are permitted uses, there are permitted with minor use permit, and then there are conditional uses. And in every single case, there are actually outright permitted uses, except for this new designation. There's nothing that the owners of these properties are allowed to do outright, without a permit. Essentially, they have no right to do anything on their property without having to come into the Planning Commission. Am I right or wrong?
Your observation is correct for new uses. However, for uses that are existing, property owners could certainly extend a lease agreement with a current tenant. If they decide they no longer, or the tenant leaves and they want to look at getting a replacement tenant that does the same exact business, say it's a vehicle repair shop, and the business owner of the vehicle repair shop decides to close his business, and the property owner could have a new owner of a vehicle repair shop come in, provided that they do it within 6 months. And that's pretty much standard under the city's non-conforming use regulations that are currently in the zoning ordinance. So for new uses, yes, but for existing uses, not necessarily.
So the property owner has the authority to do that without consulting with the city?
If they currently have a lease agreement that's about to expire and they want to renew that, they would not need permission from the city to do that, because it's continuation of an existing use.
So if it's under a conditional use permit currently, the property owner can extend that without city intervention?
In the case of something that's currently permitted, well, if they already have their use permit, that's grandfathered in so long as it's continued. So, for example, if it was a use permit for I don't know, let's just say a restaurant. I don't know why. I'm just using that as an example. And the current restaurant leaves, a new restaurant tier wants to come in, they can do that under the previous use permit. Because all the use permit runs with the land, so they would continue to be able to do that.
But right
You have 6 months to
Correct, but there is the 6 months.
grandfather clause. basically.
Exactly, thank you.
But right now, under GCI, they have a huge number of things that are outright permitted. And under the new designation, there's not even one thing that's outright permitted. Nothing.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if the Planning Commission would like to go through the uses and talk about which ones the commission feels comfortable permitting, staff is available to talk that through with you.
Okay. Okay, we're going to open it up to the public. We're going to start with those of you who have filled out requests to speak. And we're going to start with John Blake.
Good evening to the commission. I'm John H. Blake. I've been asked to appear and speak for Black Mountain Properties. And before I do that, I would ask to submit for the record a memorandum that I believe was emailed
Yes.
to city offices along with a letter from Steve Mitchell, but I'm not sure those have actually found their way in. If
We
they
all got
have,
that. We all got that.
okay, good, thank you. Then we're talking about changes to a zoning classification, GCI, whose purpose the city's own zoning code tells us is intended to accommodate all, it says all, retail, service, office, research and development, and industrial uses. This district, and I'm quoting, this district offers maximum flexibility to allow the market to determine the mixture of non-residential uses. That's section 18.06.010B. It's part of Title II. The city's own zoning code, in other words, tells us that the market, not a city government tilting that marketplace in favor of one player or another, is what should determine the business mix. Yet it seems obvious from the staff report and the proposed amendments to the zoning code, and in particular to the GCI classification, that the market has not been doing what some in city government want or would like to see. The market has simply refused to realize the vision for the so-called landmark areas. But please ask yourselves, is that a problem with the market, or is it a problem with the vision? Something is wrong, let me suggest, with a vision that depends for its realization on keeping out or squeezing out viable, prosperous businesses, the effect of which is to depress the market value of the land that houses them, in order to force the owners of that land to sell it for the sake of a vision that so far has been a mirage because the market can't produce it. So please, re-examine what it is that you're being asked to do here. Or in other words, re-examine the vision. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Steve Mitchell.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners and advisory staff. I'm Steve Mitchell with Black Mountain Properties. Following the March 25th adoption of the urgency ordinance, Black Mountain Properties has come to realize the broad sweeping effects this ordinance has on properties we own at both 551 Industrial Road and 990 Industrial Road. On April 22nd, Black Mountain Property lost a prospective tenant due to this ordinance. On February 21st, Black Mountain Properties commenced negotiations with a prospective, well-known construction supply company who desires to lease our building at 551 Industrial Road, which is in the Landmark Commercial Zone, or the LC. This prospective tenant's lease terms and the amount of tenant improvements they can invest into this location are being dictated by this ordinance and city staff. Time kills deals, and I'm concerned we're going to lose this tenant. This ordinance limits property owners' ability to negotiate leases with diverse prospective businesses that will bring substantial sales tax and other benefits to the city of San Carlos. The ordinance has serious financial impacts beyond Black Mountain Properties and affects all small property owners in the GCI designated areas. The Planning Commission needs to be aware that any further extension of this ordinance will send a message to all prospective businesses considering locating in the GCI zoned areas that the city of San Carlos has become business unfriendly to small businesses. This ordinance will have a drastic effect on the owners of property in the GCI zones as they negotiate any potential sale of their property. This ordinance unfairly creates a competitive disadvantage for business owners in the GCI designated area. I would ask that the Planning Commission declines to adopt the staff recommendation as to changing the zoning map and ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Danielle Pay.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Danielle Pay. I'm the property owner at 595 Industrial Road and East San Carlos. I'd like to give a little bit of history. I'm a little bit different here than some of the other property owners in that my husband and I have been involved in these properties for a considerable amount of time and purchased them with the vision of developing them. A family member first looked at the property and purchased the property at 850 East San Carlos, my father-in-law, with the idea of redeveloping it along the lines of what is required in the landmark provision, and was unable to successfully develop that plan, therefore sold it, or actually gave it back to the lender. My husband and I leased the property at 595 Industrial San Carlos, did a fair amount of tenant improvements so that it could be leased out, and then purchased both 850 San Carlos and 595 Industrial Road in 2007. Again, doing a minimal amount of tenant improvements so that it could be leased up. Prior to that, 850 San Carlos was very run down, in disrepair. There were a lot of drug users, squatters, graffiti. Police were often called out to that site. Since that time, we have improved it and have it leased out. But I would say that the building is a tear down. It needs to be redeveloped. And with that in mind, we have sort of a nice alignment of stars here, and that we've come in contact with the developer who is interested in doing a development involving 4 of the lots on the landmark site. And they're interested in bringing in an elite level retail fitness center that I do believe is conducive to a hotel site at some point on the corner. We are running into a roadblock here with having the emergency ordinance put in place and now a change to the zoning that would prevent this development from happening. So what I really feel is happening is very short-sighted. What we're trying to do and have been trying to do, my involvement with the property for the last 12 years, is help achieve the city's vision. But that vision needs to be achieved over time and incrementally. And that's where we are today. Up until this time, when the landmark site was originated in 1991, no one has ever gotten to the position that we are in today. And I think that speaks volumes to what is out there in the marketplace. We have a first-rate developer interested in assembling 4 parcels, putting in a permanent easement to the parcel on the corner to allow for future hotel development. And that deal is in jeopardy with this ordinance. As far as outreach, I know that during the city council meeting when they did not renew the emergency ordinance, one of the directives was for there to be outreach from the planning staff to the property owners. I find it very disingenuous to hear staff stand here and say that they have had that outreach. They've conducted that outreach by answering phone calls from owners with concerns and scheduling back-to-back meetings today, the day of the Planning Commission, 2 days after the commission report was already in place and being presented to you for approval. That's not collaboration. I hope that you will not approve this plan. I think it is punitive and burdensome on all of the property owners and will lead to a return of the conditions that the properties were in when I originally purchased them back in 2007. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is William Steele.
Good evening. My name is William Steele, and I've earlier submitted a letter to the commission. I hope you're in receipt of that, and that could be made part of the record. I believe it's a comprehensive and factual history of Landmark Site A. I've been involved with various property owners at Landmark Site A since 1999, and going back through history, there's been interest on the part of the city of seeing a hotel or landmark type development take place for 22 years. 22 years. It hasn't happened. It's very difficult to mandate economics. We do have a potential to assemble some of these properties and sell them and partially improve some of the properties there. The buildings are run down. The last time conditional use permits were in place as a requirement for tenants to occupy buildings, the buildings sat largely vacant and were occupied by squatters and drug users. There was graffiti. The equivalent of SWAT had to be called out a couple of times to extract squatters from the 850 East San Carlos building. I think everybody will agree that building's at the end of its useful economic life. And even if a hotel was interested in coming into this area, which I've approached over 40 hotel developers as a part of my marketing effort, I have gotten no offers from any of the hotel developers on this site. Even if they were interested in coming here, who would want to build a hotel next to the 850 East San Carlos Avenue building? It's a tin shack, and it looks horrible. The current zoning would allow for a Class A fitness club to be developed. Hopefully we can find a developer that will follow through with that. And we believe that would be a very synergistic development for a future hotel to locate next to. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Hartnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jim Hartnett of the law firm of Hartnett, Smith & Payco. I represent the Pay family with respect to the two properties that have already been identified that are in Landmark Site A. This afternoon I emailed Planning Commission and staff a letter. I have hard copies. I believe they've been already distributed to you. Is that correct?
It is. Correct.
Thank you. I won't belabor the extensive points that I made in the letter or that Mr. Steele made in his letter, but I think a few key points need to be made. First, I believe that there is not evidence in the record to support the staff's conclusory statement that there is a CEQA exemption that fits the recommended action. It is the burden on the city to establish a factual record to support that, and the factual record does not support that CEQA exemption. Second, I think the relevant date that the Commission should focus on is 1991, not 2009 or 2011 in terms of gaps. The city vision was established in 1991 for the properties in Landmark Site A. That city vision has not materialized over 2 decades. It is not by happenstance that it has not materialized. It is because the market does not see that Landmark Site A in the same way that the city has in terms of its policies. There's plenty of opportunity. There was plenty of money in the investment world to create a reality to that vision. It didn't take place. It won't take place. In fact, the evidence in the record today is that it is not going to take place in the manner in which the city has envisioned. But what can take place, which is allowed by the existing zoning, is a tremendous improvement to my client's 2 sites and to that general area. My client has invested millions of dollars in its sites. There are others who are looking at and interested in investing millions more. If the City Council were to adopt the recommendation that staff has put forward before you, if you were to pass that along to them, that would deprive my clients of that opportunity. It would provide the city with a failed Landmark Site A. It would not accomplish the vision that the city has established. It would not accomplish the partial vision that can, in fact, be accomplished under the existing circumstances. There is no evidence whatsoever that things will change any more than they have changed since 1991 to accomplish the city's vision. You know, when the city updated the general plan in 2009, that could have brought people out of the woodwork to say, yeah, I like that Landmark Site A. I think I'm going to invest because I've got property owners there who would be willing to work with me. Didn't happen. In 2011, when the city updated its zoning ordinances, the staff didn't bring forward, by their own admission, changes to the ordinance along the lines of what's being recommended tonight. Why didn't they? Well, they said it was inadvertent. It would not have been out of the realm of the possible if there had been a demand for that property along the lines that was envisioned in the 1991 timeframe, for the city to have said, gee, people are knocking on our door. They want to do what we've outlined since 1991. So we should change our ordinance to make sure that happens. Well, they didn't recommend the changes then for good reason. They're not relevant. They're not relevant now. They weren't relevant then. What is relevant is if the Planning Commission recommends the zoning changes as the staff has put forward and the City Council adopts them, there will be a disincentive for owners to invest in their property. And in fact, Mr. Chair, as you have pointed out, there's nothing they can do without permission of the city. And the city, based upon the conditional use permit, is not going to allow something that doesn't comport with the vision that's outlined in the recommended zoning changes. It is punitive to the current property owners. It's inconsistent with the market realities. It's inconsistent with the values of this community. Millions and millions of dollars are ripe for investment in the property under the current zoning. I ask of you one of 2 things. Either you simply let this recommendation die and don't pass it on to the City Council, which I think is your purview, or alternatively, you do make a motion to tell the City Council you don't agree with the recommendation and you ask them not to make changes to the zoning ordinances. The record doesn't support the changes that have been requested. The current property owners have been working together. They've worked together with the city staff. And the evidence is clear that the vision cannot be materialized based upon what people are willing to invest in those properties and what the marketplace dictates. So I ask you, please, don't punish these property owners for being good citizens. Don't punish them for investing millions of dollars in these properties. And don't take away the opportunity that they have to make the sites even better for them and for the city.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tony Bullock.
Hi, my name is Tony Bullock. I'm Director of Real Estate for Black Mountain Properties. As you know, we're the owners of 551 Industrial. I think my colleagues summed up pretty well, our feelings in regards to the current proposal. So I'll just emphasize a couple points. I feel that requiring a blanket CUP puts property owners at a competitive disadvantage in the marketplace. Potential tenants will simply opt for similar space in neighboring cities on the peninsula without the fees or the delays associated with having to go through a CUP process. For the tenants that are willing to brave that process, they will further be confronted with additional lease restrictions placed upon them by the city. With regards to the GCI zones, it's my feeling that the new uses in the GCI zone should be handled at the planning staff level or over the counter, essentially. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that I'd like to ask the council to recommend to the City Council that they reject the staff proposed amendments to the zoning map and the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. John Weatherby?
Hi, I'm John Weatherby. I'm with Cornish and Curry Commercial, and I work with Mr. Robert Badigan, who owns 1663 to 1669 Industrial Road. This is in the Landmark C case. He asked me to read this letter. He couldn't be here tonight. Dear Planning Commission board members, I've asked John Weatherby, my Cornish and Curry real estate agent, to represent me here this evening and read this short statement to you. My name is Robert Badigan, and I am co-owner of the property at 1667 Industrial Road. It is a 4-unit industrial building that my family built nearly 40 years ago and has owned and operated as a rental since then. The changes in zoning that have been proposed would put an undue hardship on prospective tenants that wish to conduct industrial and commercial businesses at our property. Such change would require prospective tenants to obtain expensive and time-consuming conditional use permits. These hindrances are a thing that would make our industrial rental business much more difficult to conduct and could easily result in a loss of tenant base and income for our family. My father always referred to this property as his Social Security income. Our family invested in this real estate rental building as a way to provide for our families in our retirement. Please do not deprive us of our ability to conduct our business in a sensible manner in San Carlos. The proposed zoning changes would deprive us of the income we depend on for our families. Thank you. Robert Badigan. And I would say that this ordinance, restricts a small tenant and a small property owner. CUPs are expensive. You have to hire architects. In my experience is there's $6,000 for a CUP, $2,000 to $10,000 for architects. Most small business can't afford it. And this unit, 2,400 square foot units. And I would encourage the Planning Commission and the city to work with the small business tenants and their owners and the property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker card I have is for Michael Tassung.
Good evening to the Commission. My name is Michael Singh. I'm speaking on behalf of 501 Industrial Road, located on Landmark Site A. As the others have pointed out, the landmark designation will greatly impact the existing businesses as well as future potential businesses. And on that site is Bayshore Supply, and we've greatly invested in the property. We've grown the business since 1996, and if the goal of landmark designation is to bring in a regional attraction, we've attracted customers from all over the Bay Area, reaching from San Francisco down to San Jose. The business our business is headquartered in San Carlos, and it greatly depends on that location. If we lose this location because of landmark designation, then we no longer have a place of business, and it affects all the employees there as well as employees in other cities in our other branches. And if it is the goal of the commission to provide commercial diversity and growth, it is crucial that the stability and security of our property is maintained. I would like to thank the commission tonight. Yeah, that is all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Commissioners. Dominic Chiricello. My wife and I own Dominica Winery and the building in C, Landmark C, 1697 Industrial Road. We're owner-occupied operators of a winery there. We operate under a use permit. But, after hearing everything tonight, my concern is going forward in the future, if we decide to scale back our operation and need to rent, what are the obstacles for us, for future tenants, finding people to rent our space? If God forbid, someone had an illness and the business had to move out or close, what are we left with from a real estate investment for our family? So there are concerns on my part. I am opposed to the ordinance, so that's really what I'd like to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Could you leave the speaker? Did you leave the speaker form? Just pass it to. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now it's up to us. Comments, questions?
So it's come up a couple times tonight about the outreach to the owners. Can staff comment a little bit more about that?
Certainly. At the last city council meeting, I believe it was April 22nd, we talked about extending the urgency ordinance, and at that meeting, the council directed staff to work collaboratively with the property owners, and I believe that the reference was primarily to the area that we were focused on, which was the site, would it be B? Site B, I believe, at the corner of the south corner of Hawley and Industrial Street, the triangular piece with the 5 properties. And
that's A.
That's A.
Yeah, A. And so we were directed to work collaboratively with the property owners while we looked at the zoning and reworked the zoning. So the urgency ordinance was allowed to sunset, and so that was the direction we were given. So we intended to do both, is to work on the zoning ordinance as quickly as we possibly could for a number of different reasons. One reason would be is that we want certainty in the marketplace as much as anybody else, and we want to get this through as quickly as we can and as thoughtfully as we can in a short period of time. And so we did make some appointments with the property owners in that landmark site area, and we met with we met with everybody today. So we've only had 2 or 3 weeks to put this together. So yes, it was done hastily. We've also met with the developer that's interested in developing the fitness center. So we've met with just about every interested party in that site and talked to them. And we're happy to work collaboratively into the future. Time is of the essence, I think, in a number of different regards, and so that's where we are. I don't think we were trying to be disingenuous in any way. We were just trying to work quickly. We did listen to people. I think that we reported what we heard, and also it was reported by each individual that spoke this evening.
You want to say something?
Well, I mean, I can say I'm not compelled by the narrative about punitiveness. I mean, at least I don't understand it in the sense that, on the flip, it seems like, and this is not a criticism, this is an issue to the extent that this was a property that was intended for limited purposes. To the extent that we open it up to all purposes, it's really a windfall to existing property owners, not punitive to maintain what was there before. I mean, so that doesn't really concern me. But what does concern me is the comments of Mr. Weatherby and Mr. Tsang. I mean, and I think this alludes to something you said before. I mean, I don't like the idea that folks would need to get a conditional use permit for everything and anything. I mean, I wish there was a way, and perhaps there is, to open up and allow folks to use not just the exact same uses, but similar uses, perhaps limited as to time. I mean, that seems fairer to me than not to permit anything, and would hopefully alleviate some of the concerns that folks like Mr. Weatherby and Mr. Tsang are raising. Is there a way to do that?
Certainly, we can entertain those ideas. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about the vision for the property, and it does present a very unique opportunity in our city. I mean, really, if you think about the gateway properties in our community, this is it. This is the gateway to our community. It's the Highway 101 entry exit point. It's where most people come into San Carlos, and so, and the location, it's got high visibility from Highway 101 and industrial. It's got 5 properties that are fairly large. When put together, you have enough acreage to do a fairly significant regional development. So it's got a lot of unique characteristics, and that's why there is this focus and concern about what could happen at this property. Historically, it has had its problems, as has been discussed by the property owners, but it's also had some positives. I mean, there's some good businesses there now. You have Bayshore Electric, which is a good business for the city. Construction and building materials businesses in our community have done extremely well, and they produce good retail sales taxes for the city. So you could look at some of those uses. There's some interest by building and construction materials now in one of the smaller properties there. But the reason that staff brought this forward was because we discovered that it is pretty wide open at this point, and we wouldn't have been doing our jobs if we didn't bring this forward to the commission and the council to consider what the vision is for this site and the other sites that we talked about. So I think that if we go through each of the uses and talk about maybe the history a little bit, about how things are being used there now, what the near future, the foreseeable future might hold for some maybe interim uses, if we want to continue to see a vision for that as a regional development, then we could probably look through some of these areas and go to permitted uses. Or another option is to go to a minor use permit, which is a step down from a conditional use permit. A minor use permit is half the cost of a use permit, and it is it's implemented by the zoning administrator, who is the city manager or his designee, and it's a over-the-counter type meeting or over-the-desk type meeting. So that's an option on some of these uses too. So it lowers the threshold for discretionary review and the time that's put into it. So some of these uses the city may still want to have some conditional control over, for instance, a hotel is something maybe the city wants because it generates, we've looked at generation rates in the $500,000 a year range for a 3-star hotel with a number of units. So it generates a significant revenue for the city. On the other hand, you want to make sure what kind of a hotel you get, and so you can negotiate with the flag of the hotel, and you may want to have that purview as opposed to making that type of a use non-discretionary. Offices, medical, R&D is something that we've heard from the Economic Development Advisory Commission, is something that, and it's also recommended, I believe, in our economic development plan as types of businesses and job creation that we want to create out there. So those are some uses that you might look at, and those are conditional at this time. So we're open to a dialogue about these things, and I think there's some logic in some potential changes.
And the last thing I'm going to reserve before I pass on is just, my concern is that it doesn't seem like there's any way to limit use under the current scheme, and something like a fitness club concerns me. When we've been talking forever about the traffic on Hawley, where's the traffic? I mean, if we have no control at all over what kind of fitness club goes in there, how it's going to deal with traffic patterns, that concerns me.
And you think a fitness club would actually have less traffic than a hotel?
Yeah, I do, because I would think that the traffic from the hotel is coming directly from the highway, whereas I see a fitness club, the traffic coming from residential Belmont and San Carlos down Hawley towards the highway. I mean, that's my concern, whereas a hotel, you're just popping off,
City.
You're getting into the hotel, and you're popping back on the highway. I mean, that's not, the area of Hawley that, in my experience, has the most problems. And so if we have no control over what goes in there or what it looks like, I mean, that concerns me. And then I'll pass it along for you all and your comments.
Okay.
I just have a question quickly. The urgency ordinance expires today or has expired and lapsed?
Excuse me, that would be May 9th, so in a few days, yes.
Okay, May 9th. That's right. Today's the 6th. Okay, so, and we are not being asked to consider anything that. Okay. That's all for now.
Michael?
My head is kind of spinning about this ever since I started going through all of this and listening to the comments and Al, your comments just recently kind of threw me as far as making it sound like, well, this is what we'd like, but we're not adverse to discussing it further. And then that makes me question, why are we doing this right now? Why are we talking about this right now if clearly it seems like the property owners have kind of been blindsided with this and haven't had time to collect their thoughts and haven't had, because this is a big deal. It's clear this is a big deal. And I think the amount of time that everybody, the city and the property owners have had to digest this is extremely insufficient. So I just, there's a lot of questions, and I don't know.
That is one of our options. We could essentially say we would like more time to study this. We would like to give some direction to staff and maybe have them come back with some different options.
What's the consequence of that?
Right.
I mean, is the consequence of that basically then there's a fitness club because in the time that it takes us to get back and have staff make recommendations, the fitness club is in there?
Or is the consequence that we're being asked to completely redo a vision that's been essentially a part of our policies for 20 years and mentioned in the general plan, and suddenly tonight we get to decide whether
The vision's right or not.
we want a hotel there or not.
Remember, we're also just making a recommendation to the city council.
I'm just-
so
Thank goodness.
you can you can decide anything you
Angela's
want,
deciding.
but we're actually making
We are recommending.
a recommendation. Al, what would be the consequences be?
For continuing the item?
Yes.
Yes.
With
Well,
direction.
As Commissioner Silberman mentioned, I mean, there is a possibility that someone could come in as soon as the day that the urgency ordinance ends and submit for a building permit application for the fitness center. It also depends, you know, that's the thing is there's so much uncertainty that we have about the fitness center itself. I mean, what we were originally presented with was a fitness center that probably would conform to the current code, and the developer could come in and go ahead and apply for a permit, and the city would have to process that. So
Could that happen either way, since the urgency ordinance is going to lapse before the city council could actually address it? So that could happen either way.
it's a possibility. On the other hand, if you're a shrewd developer and you do work in a commercial region, you don't want to upset the community either. So you're probably not going to do that. But you know, I'm just saying that if you were to be ultra conservative about it, or very conservative, then you would consider that possibility. But what is the likelihood of that? That's what we talked about with the Economic Development Advisory Commission. They asked the same question. And that was the answer is, yes, there is a possibility. Is there a likelihood? If I was the developer, I wouldn't do that. And I know this developer, and he's a pretty shrewd developer. And so I would say that to be conservative, you'd probably want to stick to the zoning.
So, okay, I have some questions that I'm going to ask here.
And if I could just add to that as well, one of the other things that we heard is that there's another proposal that could be a much larger development proposal that would require a zone change. So that would have city discretionary review. So those are some of the things that are being kicked around.
Okay.
And if I might just add that even if a building permit was filed and issued, there's no vested right to build.
Would still have to come here, wouldn't it?
No, but what I'm saying is if there is no conditional use permit required and there's a building permit issued, there's no vested right to build until substantial work is actually performed on the site. So up until that point in time when substantial work has been performed and all permits have been pulled, the regulations can still be changed.
Okay.
Legally. Not necessarily the city would want to do that, but.
So, let's see. Some of the land use policies that I was looking at, for example, policy, and I always go back to the general plan and these things. And part of my concern here that I've sort of, and I'm going to ask this question, is the problem with the fitness center that it's not generating money for the city?
That's certainly an economic development concern, yes.
Okay. So when I heard that, and that was one potential reason why we were considering all of this. And I went to Land Use Policy 11.11, which essentially says ensure that new development or redevelopment on the northwest and southwest corners. Oh, this is the north and southwest corners, not the north and east corners. Okay, so that, boy, okay. So that kind of takes that out of the place, out of the, I was thinking it was the east corners. Okay, so that changes things a little bit. As somebody who lives in the neighborhood adjacent to this site, I've actually talked to several people who live in that neighborhood. And I think a lot of them would actually have a concern with a hotel going in there, and they would have a concern with office buildings going in there. And in the same line that they have concerns with the transit village and the height and the noise and the impact of those buildings, I think that a developer coming in would also find that they are going to have some concerns that they will have to address from the surrounding land uses. So I look at this and think for 22 years, and I kind of round up a little bit, it's a quarter of a century that we've been talking about a hotel here. And that's a very long time to tie up these properties. And I'm thinking that there may be a better use for these properties than a hotel. And I would like to see it in some way benefit the city. I look at a fitness center and I think, you know, that could benefit the city. I look at things that this city needs, and to me, one of the things that this city needs is more places for our young people to actually go and do things. So I think if there's some way that we can incorporate a fitness center as part of a project that down the road could also include a hotel, I don't see the issue with the fitness center as being as big a deal, I guess, as others may see it. I also look at these three properties, these three landmark sites, and I really have a problem with landmark site C. Okay, to me, that's not. I mean, when the Circle Star was developed, that took care of that piece of the landmark property. And as far as I'm concerned, we should remove landmark C designation from those properties that are sitting there. Those really aren't part of, to me, a landmark site anymore, okay? Because they're not adjacent to the entrance. They don't have freeway access, which seem to be two criteria for that particular site. I look at landmark site B and I go, there's storage on there. We know storage is never going to leave. It's never going to leave. We've got a In-N-Out Burger on the other piece of property. That's never going to change. I mean, not for the next 50 years probably. I mean, when a McDonald's goes in or a Burger King goes in or an In-N-Out Burger goes in, they're going to stay there forever. They just make too much money and it's not going to change. So we're really left with looking at landmark site A. And to me, when you look at that and you go, okay, now we're looking at really one site. We're not really looking at three different landmark sites. And I get real uncomfortable with looking at one particular site because I'm worried about, really, are we spot zoning? Are we really looking at this one site here and saying, we really want a hotel here, or we really want an office building here? And If you remove all the other things and you sort of bring it down to that sort of one item, I get real uncomfortable because we're now looking at really one spot. Plus, I really feel uncomfortable with the whole idea of putting all of these restrictions on these sites. I mean, to me, it just really feels like we're being very unfriendly to the businesses. And that bothers me because I understand how much and how important the businesses are in this community. And I'd like to give them as much latitude as possible. So one of the ways that I've thought of, instead of doing all that we've done here, and I know you've done a tremendous amount of work, is maybe if we just sort of define in here what the landmark sites are. That might be a good start and a good talking point to actually develop further and to talk to the business owners and move forward that way. Because for me, it's going to be really hard for me to vote for any of this stuff here that's been presented tonight. The only thing that I right off the bat could do is vote to remove Landmark C designation and send that on. Anything else, I think we really need to work with the business owners. So that's where I am right now.
Scott, when you say you want to define what that is, where what do you mean? Like put it in the general plan?
I don't know whether we add it into the general plan or whether we add it into the zoning ordinance, but to me, I just I don't see creating an entire zoning category for essentially Landmark A, because when In-N-Out Burger came in, it was very. No one ever said, "Oh, we got to have a hotel here," or "We've got to have an office building here." It was always intended to sort of be a restaurant and to go with PAMF. And so, from my perspective, I'm not sure that office buildings are going to work south of Hawley, because what PAMF is building right now is office buildings. They haven't even started the hospital, and my guess is that it may be several years down the road before they even build the hospital. And so we're looking at, if we want to build office buildings there, we're really looking 5-10 years out again. And now we've tied up those properties for 30-35 years, and I just, and the hotel's not going to come in possibly until the hospital's built. And I have some real problems with tying up these properties when we have some potential right now to get it started. And if we got, a little something started, you can build on that, and maybe a hotel will come in and say, the city's invested in this small piece of the property already, and has started the change, and now we can come in and build on that. And I'd rather see that as a goal for the city than to see us say, no, we're going to stop that, and we're going to wait for a hotel to come along.
But I don't think they're talking about a small piece. I think they're talking about 4 of the 5 parcels as the fitness center. That basically is the whole thing.
And that I don't know what that plan is. I have never seen
and we
that
won't
plan,
see it, right?
And so we wouldn't even see it.
But we'll never see it.
Unless we essentially say, let's take a look at that and figure out.
How do we do that?
Well, we'll never see it if we change the zoning.
We'll never see it if we don't change the zoning. I mean, they're just going to do it. I mean, that's my concern. I mean, look. I mean, I've said my piece. I'm not gonna. If there's no interest. If there's interest, I would like to explore the idea of increasing the number of permitted uses. Perhaps also, I mean, I like the idea of streamlining and decreasing the cost and the difficulty in obtaining a permit. If there is interest in exploring that, then I think we should explore that. If there's not, I'm going to shut up and we can we can go ahead and vote this down.
I think we should explore it, actually.
Would you explore it for only landmark parcel A?
I don't understand. I understand what you're saying about C, although I'd be interested in hearing more if Mr. Savay disagrees. I'm not sure why you group. I mean, your assumption that because there's storage there, there's always going to be storage there. I just don't know where that comes from. I mean, I think is that 3 parcels right there that the storage is on?
It's yeah, and
I mean, it seems like a very nice property
yes,
as well.
If I could just chime in on that, Mr. Chairman. With regard to that site, we have talked to a hotel developer about that site over the years, and it's a very desirable site. But the problem is that the storage use is a very lucrative land use, and it's very difficult to change that particular land use. But it is, on the other hand, a very desirable site for either an office or a hotel because of its visibility and access to the freeway. So that really is still, I think, a viable landmark site. I think to the chair's point, though, with Site C, I don't think you could call it a primary or major gateway anymore. I think that with the development that has occurred, the purpose of the original landmark designation for Site C has been achieved to a greater extent or a greatest enough extent, in that it's not a gateway. You can't see it as you're going northbound on Industrial Way like you used to be able to. I'm talking about Site C now. So I think staff would be amenable to eliminating Site C from the landmarks. In fact, I think that the general plan refers to the other 2 sites as the primary gateway sites.
So yeah, I mean, I have no problem with that.
Removing C.
None at all.
So do you want to sit here tonight and to go through sort of the potential uses for landmark A and B, or would you rather sort of come back to us with an expanded plan? Because I really have a problem with zoning something where there isn't anything that really can be done on there without forcing it to come to the city.
You know what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is if I could ask for a 5-minute recess so that I can consult with staff and legal counsel.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
are you guys?
Al, can you let everybody know that we're going to start now? Okay, we're going to begin the meeting again. Al, based on your discussion?
Based on staff's discussion, what we decided is what we'd like to do is have some time to look through the uses and bring you back something that's more fine-grained and look through each of the uses and come back to the Planning Commission with, something more tailored to those two sites that we talked about. And we'd like a little guidance to whether or not the commission wishes to remove Site C or not tonight. But that's what we'd like to do, is bring it back to a future Planning Commission meeting in one of the next two meetings, either, maybe the second meeting in May would be a little close for us and a little too fast, but maybe the first meeting in June, bring it back with some more fine-grained look at the uses.
Can I also make a recommendation that the commission can talk about that? Maybe you can have some meetings with the parcel owners involved in that to get their feedback about what they feel in addition to what staff feels, and maybe that will help you in crafting something and having a little bit more time to work with the owners so that they don't feel like they're being pushed down this road of having very few choices for the use of their land.
Understood. Yes. And if you can provide us any further guidance on uses that you would like us to take a look at or anything else.
Commissioners?
More. I mean, these concerns have been echoed. It is very limited. I mean, I'm not even sure whether. I mean, if we're talking about broader retail, broader restaurants, if we're going to allow a fitness club some parameters on what it needs to look like. I mean, the types of uses, and I think this goes back to the dialogue question. Let's find out what folks want to use this for, and then let's think about whether those are uses that seem compatible with what the city needs and wants and has wanted for 21 years or 2.5 decades, or what did you say? Quarter century.
Quarter of a century.
Something hyperbolic. Yeah.
We're at 22 years.
22 years.
So what we would ask or suggest is that the Planning Commission continue the item. And
can we just give direction on
let's
landmarks?
just
continue it to an uncertain date.
Okay.
And staff will look at the calendar and see when we can get back to you.
Okay, we're going to do this by a quick nod of heads. Landmark C, how many are in favor of removing Landmark C from the project? Okay, raise hands. That works too. And is everybody in favor of having staff move forward with looking at additional uses?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So do I have a motion to continue this item to a date uncertain?
So moved. Although I'll observe for the record that I may not be here the first week in the first meeting in June for what it's worth.
Well, then it should go much smoother.
Yeah, exactly. You might want to schedule it for the first week in the first meeting in June.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're going to move on to reports, correspondence, and general information. Report on recent city council actions.
Chair Marsters, we have no reports from the City Council.
Can you explain what happened to the project up on Club?
Oh, the annexation project on Club Drive. That would be 299 Club Drive, I believe.
Yeah.
The City Council voted, I believe, 4-1, or was it 4-2? I can't recall. 4-2.
I hope it wasn't 4-2.
3-2.
Excuse me, 3-2, to approve the annexation. Were there two negative votes, Al? Do you
I hear
recall
there.
for 299
I'm thinking
Club
it might have
Drive?
been 3-1.
Or 3-1. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but essentially it passed. So the second reading of the ordinance is scheduled for council hearing next Monday on May 13th.
Okay. Planning Commission comments or reports?
I have nothing.
Yeah, I just, again, I think I may be here, not here, the first meeting in June, for what it's worth.
Okay.
I have one thing. For May 20th, it doesn't look like we'll have any projects ready for the commission to review, but we will go ahead and have a meeting so that we can hold election of officers. The code requires that we do that every year in May. So we want to do that at the next meeting. And then also at the same time, you would elect a new representative from the commission to serve as chair on the RDRC Residential Design Review Committee. So we'll do that on the 20th. So it'll be a light agenda.
Thank you. Correspondence?
None?
Planning staff comments, reports, and updates of current projects.
I'd just like to add to that, I mean, theoretically, we could have the zoning back on the 20th? Just to throw that out there?
Yep.
Okay.
Anything new on the parking, the downtown parking?
The downtown parking study is actually...
This committee I've ever been on.
It's moving forward quite nicely. There were a couple of additional research items that the, I believe it's the parking subcommittee, the
Okay.
3-member parking subcommittee had recommended, so we asked our consultant to perform some additional analyses with respect to that. They are working, the consultant is working on preparing an administrative draft report, which will then be presented to a large stakeholder group. So that's something that we want to take out to the community, to the neighbors, and present those findings and hear from the community regarding that. And then we would bring it forward to the 6-member stakeholder group, which you are part of. So we're getting closer.
If nothing further, meeting adjourned.